Okay, quick question. When was the last time you actually had a good healthcare experience? It's a tough one, right? I hear you. The truth is, whether you're in pharma, in healthcare, a patient or caregiver, or just someone trying to stay well, we all bump up against this tangled, complicated system. Let's be honest, it's not working the way it should. But here's the thing, we can do better. And it takes all of us to build something smarter, fairer, and more human. And this is why I'm so excited about Pharmageddon events by Impatient Health, a movement shaking things up in conversations we absolutely must have. And I'm so excited that a discussion about these events are part of the inaugural episodes 1 and 2 of this podcast. So welcome to IPZO Facto, where when it comes to innovation, there's no way but forward. I'm Zina Manji, a regulatory strategist in healthcare innovation, professional maze runner of the life sciences industry. I spent over 20 years working with big pharma, engaging with scrappy startups and medtech trailblazers, chasing down ideas that could actually make a difference. Now with InnoPathways, my mission is simple: decode the chaos of healthcare innovation and help people live better, healthier lives through new innovations. Because we don't need more buzzwords, we need bold moves. So if you're picking up what I'm putting down here, go ahead and subscribe, like this video, and drop a comment below. Not because of the algorithm alone, because this does help, but so that we can build this thing together, bring in amazing guests, and serve up better, braver conversations about healthcare's future and insights and strategies and actions. All right, so let's dive in. The full episode is coming up right after the highlight reel.
What keeps you up at night? Just going to think about it, but I'm going to do something. The innovation that comes from having a smaller group in a room together, discussing
that holistic view of a person,
getting the right patient advocates in the room, and making sure that they can hold pharma accountable. And there were some moments where I was, oh gosh, how's it going?
Go out and find out today what people are actually talking about in the industry and what they're not talking about.
If you make Gen Z and Alpha your problem, they will become your problem. You need to bring them in.
Create these traps for ourselves, right? That then we need to untangle.
But we're all patient, so there is the one industry binds us all. The patient has to be at the heart. But what does that actually mean in problems? And even if it's just that little flame, it's about breaking down silos as well. Small, but mighty.
Being overly processed takes away from the natural creativity.
Ambition has now come up, right? Created these solve sessions to bring together the ideas around how is it that different industries can kind of work with pharma. And not
one wish I had for people to take away from the conversation, it would just be
go in, there's the big ideas, there's the shaking up the industry, blowing it up, rebuilding it, tangible solutions. That and the manifesto is about a pledge to be better.
Well, hello. Welcome to the IPZO Facto podcast. I'm so thrilled to be joined by my two friends, Lucy and Noreen, for this episode to talk about an upcoming event called Pharmageddon. So really interesting name. So Lucy and Noreen, how about introduce yourselves and what you do and what motivates you?
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm the Senior Event Manager here at Impatient Health. Pharmageddon USA is my baby. I created it because I felt there was a necessity, something that we really needed in our industry, a place where people can get together and try and improve the industry in a cohesive way, not sitting around listening, passively listening to people talk on a stage. This was about rolling our sleeves up, really making a difference within the industry. And I felt this was something that we really, really needed to happen. And with the help of people, experts like Noreen and our CEO, Paul Sims, we've made it happen.
Hello, my name is Noreen. I'm the head of consulting at Impatient Health. A lot of the work that I do with Impatient, generally speaking, is around disrupting the status quo in pharma. It's about getting pharma to think a little bit differently out of the box, as you would call it. But I think, Pharmageddon to me, and really how that ties into the Impatient Health brand, with the work that Lucy and the team has been doing, is how do we actually make that come to life? How, we can say, let's think out of the box, let's disrupt pharma, but those are all just words. And actually putting that into action is where you get an event like Pharmageddon, where you actually get your hands dirty and try to solve the problems that we've all been, maybe griping about within pharma. And I think that's just one of the reasons why I really do love the event. I think it's immersive, it's an experience. It allows you the opportunity to say, I'm not just going to think about it, but I'm going to do something about it. And that's why I love kind of being a part of the journey with Lucy and the team.
Yeah, I think also originally Pharmageddon, the whole word and where it came from was
Yeah.
about blowing up the industry and building it back better. And sometimes it takes a radical change, something completely different, to get people's cogs turning in a different way, to look at problems in a different way. So yes, we're doing something colossal and it seems like big and scary, but actually maybe if it just makes you look at one topic and one part of your pharma industry life and makes you like problem solve in a different way, that's what Pharmageddon's all about. Like you go in, there's the big ideas, there's the shaking up the industry, blowing it up, rebuilding it, but at the same time leaving with tangible solutions to your problems. And even if it's just that little flame, and then having a community of people from different companies that are able to help you on that journey from then on, because it's all about breaking down silos as well. The problem that we have is, people just work in their silos, and we have some really great innovations, and we only get to see those innovations when we put people into a more workshopping experience, instead of going to a 2-day event where you passively sit on your hands and listen to panelists say their piece, humble brags. Every single person has to be involved in the event. And by the end of the 2 days, you will know personally everybody in that room. And I think that's what makes this event purposefully small but mighty.
That's fascinating. And I think you really explain the term Pharmageddon and why that's used for this event. And really fascinating, Lucia, you talk about the origin of this event, and Noreen about why it's even needed. Therefore, an event like this needed what you call the unconference, I think, and there's a manifesto for Pharmageddon. So can you talk just a little bit more and going a little bit deeper on that manifesto, and how does that feed into, is this a movement that's being created? And can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of movement and how you expect things to change? How would we drive change through this mechanism of the organization of the event itself?
I think as an event, it has progressed and mutated as it's gone along, because we started with this Farmageddon, blowing things up, let's go. And we realized we couldn't keep saying the same thing over and over again. That's not progress. It's just being sensational for the sake of being sensational. So, which is why we actually went in this different realm into the agenda of the 4As, which we'll get into at a later date. But we're always thinking, like myself and Noreen and Paul and other parts of the team, we're always brainstorming and saying, like, how can we make this the most brilliant event, the most radical, but yet helpful event in the industry? I think so much of that and the manifesto is about a pledge to be better, and to every day or week have a little bit of thinking of how can I make this industry better. We all got into this industry. I think pharma is probably one of the biggest purpose-driven industries there are. And that is really obvious. And sorry for going on a tangent, but it becomes so obvious
No,
when
please.
we have Pharmageddons how purpose driven everyone in that room is. And sometimes we go a little bit off our path of why did we start? And I think Pharmageddon brings it back to that purpose and makes us realign with what our values are and how we can bring that into our work.
Yeah, I think the values and bringing that into our work is so key, because to your point, it's very purpose driven, and for those who choose a career in pharma, you wouldn't do it if you didn't have kind of that purpose to make a difference, and specifically in healthcare. And but at times there's that feeling of, well, are we aligned, right, as the purpose of the company and in teams, and how we're trying to accomplish the goals, how we are looking at different areas to innovate in, and how we do that. At times there can be kind of a feeling of being overly processed, that kind of takes away from the natural creativity, ideation, and the sense of, right, let's just do it. Let's how do we get this done? So in terms of Farmageddon as a movement, uh, my impression and my experience with Farmageddon, having attended last year, is this feeling of, this is a movement for change, because it's values driven, as you say, but it's also this alignment. How can we do something different? And we will get into then, how do you curate attendees and speakers for this type of event? But Noreen, I was curious, from your point of view and your experience from pharma, uh, do you feel that this is a movement, and what do you both think success looks like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when we first started, it was about, as you said, kind of making people think differently, act differently, disrupting. It was just about, as Lucy says, breaking things down, right? That deconstruction process is really important to then build back up and build back up. So at first, success was just get people to think differently. It's just about breaking it down. If everyone's frame of reference has shattered post event and they're left in pieces, we've succeeded because that's all it was about, right? And I think as Pharmageddon has evolved over the years, and I know Lucy's talked about this loads, the ambition has now come up, right? So it's okay, it's not just about breaking things down, it's about how do you connect with other parts of the global community and the ecosystem around healthcare. Are there partners or industries that we can look at for inspiration, whether that be technology or media or culture, arts? And created these solve sessions to bring together the ideas around how is it that different industries can kind of work with pharma, not against pharma or in separate bubbles to pharma, to genuinely create that holistic view of a person, right? People are not just their conditions that they deal with on a basis, day-to-day basis, or the symptoms that they have when they're feeling ill. They live and breathe and work and play in a society. And so how is it that we can actually genuinely bring together different parts of society, different industries that work to build a whole person together, and pharma is a part of that, to then kind of almost superhumanize us, if you will, for lack of better words. And I think that's something that we really want to raise as the next ambition. One thing that the team is doing now is talking about how do we get people from other industries, how do we get folks in finance, in media, in tech to come to Pharmageddon. Maybe because in the beginning they might not be motivated by what pharma's doing, but they can then push that ambition to a new level. And I think that's kind of where Lucy and the team are really taking the event to new heights.
Yeah, really interesting. And I can hear the evolution from just last year. I mean, in 2024, if I understand correctly, that was the inaugural event in the U.S.
Yep.
And to your point, it was a point in time. I'm hearing that's a point in time introduction breakdown, but now it's like, okay, let's get to the next phases. So to that point, how do you curate speakers and attendees for this type of event? I'm not calling it a conference, unconference, right? Where
we don't have a conference.
yeah, exactly, where you are trying to encourage and enable those solve sessions, those discussions, and having it in as I recall from last year, in a safe space, right? Where people can really talk openly about challenges that they face, that across industry, across companies, could say, well, these are the tactics that work for this department or that department, or collaborations, and collaborating in a way that maybe was not thought of before, and kind of doing things differently, because time is one of our most precious resources. And yes, it takes time to develop something, but how much better if we can do it efficiently and on target? And to your point, Noreen, about the whole person, somebody is not a diabetic, right? They are a person who is experiencing diabetes. They also might be an athlete, right? So this disease is not defining the individual. We tend to defy individuals based on their disease states, and maybe one disease at a time, versus there's so many things going on. If you layer onto that cultural differences, life environment differences. So really intriguing what you say, Noreen, about the whole person, right? And what that means. So Lucy, Pharmageddon is your baby, as you said. And so how do you, based on your past experience, what did you have to learn differently or tackle differently in terms of how do you even curate for speakers and attendees for this type of event?
I think with pharma and with patients at the core and the heart of it, there's a lot more empathy that goes into this event than does a lot of other, in my experience. It's interesting because one of my favorite parts of this role is talking to the patient advocates and getting the right patient advocates in the room and making sure that they can hold pharma accountable. And I think some of the most liveliest debates that we had at Pharmageddon USA was because we got really punchy advocates who really knew their stuff as well. And there were some moments where I was like, oh gosh, how's this going to go? We felt that it elevated the event to the next level. I remember panelists, like really amazing senior pharma executives, telling their stories about their health journeys. And I know this has been said plenty, but we're all patients, so it's the one healthcare is the one industry that combines us all. It binds everybody. And, an event like this is there to remind us that, yes, we still need to keep the patient at the heart, but in a useful way. What can the patient experience bring to a pharma process? And because so many times we talk about having a patient has to be at the heart. But what does that actually mean in an event like this? It's not just people getting up and telling their stories. It's how does their experience and what can we take from their experience to make the industry better, and really think about how best to engage the patient. And then also looking into people's personal stories. And I remember, Zena, you told your story on stage last year, and that was really moving. And people started getting up and telling their purpose stories and backgrounds as well. And it was a really unique moment that you don't get at events. You don't think about almost being moved to tears about someone's beautiful story at something like a pharma conference. So I think that's what kind of ups the ante with Pharmageddon.
Yeah, I'm recalling those moments from last year, and I think it's very touching moments. Like you say, it really grabs you, right? And makes us all kind of pause and rethink about why we're doing what we do. Oftentimes, when we're in a corporation, we get very focused on our objectives, right? Meeting the objectives, meeting the business timeline. We are patient driven, right? Because that's what we need to do. But sometimes we need to pause and just think, let's hear the patient. Are we solving a problem that they actually feel needs to be solved? And are we solving it in the right way, holistically in the right way? What are barriers that are holding back, the barriers to adoption, right? And as you say, patient advocates are very educated in their own right. They know their disease and several diseases very well. Hence, they are very well placed to bring ideas to the forefront. And it requires, I think, a mindset shift. When you are approaching a conference such as this, what did you find in the beginning? Was there things that surprised you, or were there challenges that you didn't expect, or challenges that you expected but actually people were very open to it? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the unique thing about Pharmageddon is the thought leaders kind of mold the event. So when we choose and select our speakers, it's usually because they're already the provocateurs and the disruptors of the industry. And that's kind of our, if you're known for that, we usually approach you, or we may already know you and say, hey, we'd love for you to speak at this event. And the first thing I do when I interview the speaker is ask them, what keeps you up at night? What is your issue? What's your problem? And what would you like to speak about? And so we take an agenda that is already thought out, that we believe is going to be, really thought provoking. But we don't just do it on us. It's not just me and Noreen and Paul sitting around and being like, we think this will be a great thing to talk about. I then want the backing of the thought leaders. So,
and I think, Lucy, something that you do before you even start that process, right, is Zena, the team. One of the things that I love about Pharmageddon is even within Impatient, it's almost like it's an event, or it's a initiative that everyone gets involved in our teams. So we've got 3 different parts of the business: the one that does the events and runs the events, we've got the consulting team that feeds into the solve sessions, and then we've got our research team, which actually gathers those insights. So before we do Pharmageddon, Lucy will commission the team to say, right, we need to do a research sprint, which is an offering that we give our clients. We do that internally, so we're practicing what we preach, to say, let's go out and find out today what people are actually talking about in the industry and what they're not talking about, because that's just as important. And I think that was what led us to talk about climate change, and the impact of health and health equity in pharma, and the role that we should be having. It's topics like that. And I think, Lucy, you're always very good about saying, anything is fair game in the beginning. Let's throw it out all on the table. So, I revived my master's thesis by saying, Lucy, I want to talk about bioethics in pharma. And she went, right, let's add it to the list and then we'll think about it. So, I think we do go through, as Lucy says, this journey, but it starts with a very core evidence base. The research team is going away, speaking to actually some of these people that end up being our thought leaders and our speakers, to say, what are you guys interested in? What are your, as Lucy says, what are your challenges? But then also, then we take a critical lens to that to say, what are people not talking about, and why are they not talking about that? And that helps, you, Lucy, build that first version of the agenda that you say, right, these are, I think, the things we need to talk about. And then it evolves as, life happens, as geopolitical trends take place, as people change their minds, as different topics of conversation come to the forefront. And I think that that flexibility and that evolution is what we're expecting pharma to do. So again, it becomes something that we practice what we preach. And I think sharing that with a broader audience of even how we do it on a day-to-day basis. And don't get me wrong, we want to pull our hair out sometimes as well. It's not easy, that journey, but it's about being willing to be on that journey that I think is really powerful to do.
I think we're kind of unique in that I've never heard of anyone else doing this, where we have a flexible-ish agenda, which actually goes through a evolution series over 6 months, and we just keep editing and changing it and making sure that the up-to-date topics are being discussed. Because if you create an agenda 8 months ago and you say exactly, if you stay rigid to that agenda, especially in the way the US is moving at the moment, things are just not going to be current. And so that's something I'm quite proud about, is our flexible approach in the agenda, and the thought leaders, and they want to have their say. So they'll say, this is what I want to talk about. I'm like, right, that will work on that topic. It's not, we don't just pick an agenda by willy-nilly. It is all thoroughly researched by the incredible team at Impatient Health. So yeah, it's great.
Talk about collaboration within pharma industry. Actually, like you're saying, you're practicing just that, how you're organizing this event. Because to your point, I mean, things are changing it could be for anything. It could be geopolitical. The pace of technology is exponentially going faster than regulations can keep up with, faster than clinical evidence can keep up with, right? And so there are so many aspects. And as you say, environmental things like climate change or other healthcare ecosystems broadly. I mean, all of these things can impact the system in which we live and how we acquire and experience healthcare. That in and of itself is also up for discussion, right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So to your point of this is a very different type of event. So I'm not calling it let's not call it a conference, because what you think about from conference is very scripted agenda, very specific topics, and specific speakers and moderated sessions, let's say, that speak to that topic, few questions, and then we move on to the next, and then to the next segment, to the next segment. So here, I mean, you are living and breathing the definition of agility. So let's talk about that a little bit. I think, yeah, absolutely. In order to be relevant, that's what I'm hearing, right? In order to be relevant, you have to make it real and meet the moment. And for that reason, you have to be flexible. So and you have to focus at some point, because otherwise it will go on for days, right? And so how do you choose which topics to focus on? And very interesting about what's not being talked about. I think that's a really good thing to flag, is what's not being discussed. Let's discuss that. We're coming to this event. We are individuals, professionals in healthcare, coming to this event, and happen to be at the companies we're at. But then let's have an open conversation about how we all integrate in the broader industry, because as they say, rising tides lifts all boats, right? So how do you figure out where to then say, okay, here's the line now. This is it. This is the agenda. These are the topics, and go.
Lucy has an executive order button that she pushes and says, no more people.
Somebody who has just completed the timed agenda. So no, obviously at some point we have to push the button, because we need to make sure our panelists are fully brought in on the topics and understand and start to really flesh it out, and make sure that all the organization is in place. It's not complete chaos. And I think a good example of coming to this decision of an evolutionary stage is in New York last year. We had an incredible out of industry speaker, head of DEI for New York University, Lisa, and she brought up Gen Z and Alpha, and saying, if you make Gen Z and Alpha your problem, they will become your problem. You need to bring them in. And this became an evolution. We had different execs saying, we need a Gen Z panel. This is what we should do. So last month, we did a webinar, how to talk to Gen Z and stop belittling them and talking down to them and acting like they don't matter when they are the future. And I was talking to a speaker about this, and they were saying 70% of her team was Gen Z. Wow. And this is not being discussed enough. So this is a kind of, I'm going convoluted path here, but I'm kind of explaining the evolutionary path that comes from one topic. And the engagement that we've had from that means that we are now having a Gen Z live panel in Philadelphia in 6 weeks' time. And I think this is a good example of how little seeds are sown by experts, which was an industry expert, and now we're running with it, and people are really interested and engaged, because Gen Z is the future, and they need a seat at the table.
And I think, I will just add to that by saying, we all know Lucy's got a tough job, and we don't doubt that. And Lucy's got even a tougher job, because I think in her role, she sees it all. So she's, Lucy, I didn't even know about that example and how that was kind of the seed that you decided to help grow. But I think it's so powerful, because when I take a step back and I say, what does this event require? It requires someone that has the foresight, someone that has the vision to say, actually, this topic is one that's going to blow up. I can feel it. And I think, Lucy, you're so good at that, where you can kind of take that Gen Z moment and say, that's not being spoken about. It needs to be kind of amplified. And, alongside Lucy's many hats, she then becomes that amplifier of the voices, as almost someone that's, in the industry, but on the periphery of the industry, to say, guys, push this ball back into this court, bring this ball back into this court, right? It's almost this beautiful orchestrator of, a game, if you will. And I think that is, as someone that sits in pharma, in the industry with clients on a day-to-day basis, when you're in the middle of the trees, it's hard to see through the forest, whatever that metaphor is. But I think it becomes really, really, really important for us to have people like Lucy to say, hey, actually, let's connect these guys. Let's double down on this. Let's dial this up. And that's why an event like this kind of allows that spark to then say, we need to amplify this voice. We need to bring this topic to the forefront. And I love that about that example that you shared, Lucy, to kind of highlight that. It does it beautifully.
Oh, thank you. I think it kind of helps that I really don't know much about pharma. I am an event professional. That's my shtick, and I leave all the flesh on the bones to the experts like Noreen, who actually takes my very small idea and makes it something really tangible and brilliant. So yeah, it's just it's great that we all get to work together and produce something that's quite unique.
When we're in companies, we tend to become very insular, right? Where we're talking about our products, our company, our patients we're trying to serve, and for good reason, because time is of the essence, and patients need to be served, and a lot needs to happen to bring product to market. And we're each being asked to do a lot more and cover a lot more things, especially if you're in charge of a team and a global team. And there is just always so much to do, right? There's the day-to-day whirlwind that everyone is dealing with, and you're trying to get through that whirlwind. So it's by no means because anyone's wanting to ignore anything. It's just that, we just got to keep that focus, and the what you just brought to mind is that you do need to kind of step away. And you need to step away to be able to see the broader picture, what's missing, what can help to break down a barrier, because sometimes there's perceived barriers. There's not really a barrier there. It's a perceived barrier because we all do what we've always done, right? And,
Yeah.
and sometimes we're doing processes and it's like, well, we've just always done it that way.
Yeah. And if I
And
can add to that, Zena, I
yeah.
think, one of the examples again of that in a Pharmageddon that we recently did was, I was speaking to them and saying, what motivated you to come to the event? And they said, oh, I've heard about it, really excited about it, the momentum. And they said, one of the things that I really, really want to learn is from my colleagues in the industry. And again, to your point about these perceived barriers, we believe that, oh gosh, if I belong to pharma company A, I can't speak to pharma company B because of competitive intelligence, because then, we're sharing company trade secrets and things like that. And you almost get bound by that inability to even interact with other pharma companies because you feel like, oh gosh, that's against the rules, right? And one of the things that we do talk about in Pharmageddon is like, what are actually the compliance challenges that you're facing? Because they're probably not what you think they are, right? You're probably perceiving a lot of barriers and building up those walls. So when he said to me, I'm actually so excited to be at this conference, because, or at this not conference, if you will, because I get to learn from industry peers in a safe and open space. It sort of allowed me to think, oh gosh, we're naturally just sharing stories, but these stories become case studies. They become conversations that people can take back to their teams. They almost help further the industry as a whole because it's not about competing with one another, it's about learning from one another. And I think that's kind of the reframing of the dialogue around these perceived barriers that we have, which the event really kind of helps nurture and foster as well.
Absolutely. And I think, Lucy, you said you're not a pharma individual, but actually we all experience healthcare. And so in some way we're all stakeholders in this, right? And I think what I love about what you both described about the organization of this event is you need to be able to step back and see the broader picture. There needs to be someone who can step back and see that broader picture so that you can create. And that's something that is hard to do when you're in the moment and in a structure. It's hard to step back and see that broader picture. So I think having an event where it enables fresh thinking is really helpful, because you then get motivated on, okay, maybe I can think about it this way. So it really does create mindset shifts, I think, when you're having those conversations and you're kind of getting energized. And one thing for me that was really helpful is that, as an individual professional, you often feel like, especially when you're having challenges, right? Let's face it, that when things go well, you feel good, and that doesn't seem to be a problem. However, the sharing that is also helpful from the broader aspect. But especially when you're going through challenges as a individual in a company, and you're stuck trying to change a process or trying to encourage a new type of collaboration, sometimes you kind of feel like, well, is it me? Am I crazy? Or why is this, you end up kind of self-doubting yourself, because you feel like, people stare at you with eyes glazed over, because, just always done it this way. Why are you questioning this? Let's just get on with it, kind of thing. And so you do kind of feel like you're alone in what you're trying to do as a change agent. I think especially for people who are change agents wanting to drive something different, this can be, sometimes it can be very, very difficult. And I remember at last year's event, talking about, how we collaborate and within our companies, and someone mentioned about, caught in a trap. We create these traps for ourselves, right? That then we need to untangle. But I think in an event like Pharmageddon, what ends up coming up is that, well, sometimes maybe you don't have to actually untangle it. You just stop it and do it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big thing about the event is I get asked a lot if they can come online and if people can join the event digitally. And it's not that we don't want to include people, but it completely ruins the vibe, because the whole point is that people feel that they're in a safe space. Like we call ourselves the home for the weirdos, right? The people, safe space for people who just think a little bit differently. And it's not like it's Chatham House rule or anything, but we want to create that environment where everyone's in the moment and they feel like they can share. And so for us, we obviously big on digital events, but this one is about being in the room, and we can't really do half of the event digitally because it's about these expertly created solve session, which are Noreen's children. And it's basically this incredible workshop, like 150, 200 person workshop, where everyone is all thinking together. And honestly, the feeling in the room is kind of electric. And we want to always foster that community and that feeling of a safe space.
Yeah. And I think to kind of add, Lucy, to what you're saying, sometimes I find that not just in the world of pharma, but just in the world of corporate organizations, as we evolve, we believe in hierarchies and bureaucracies and reporting lines, and we have systems and structures and processes that we so desperately do need. I'm not dismantling those or critiquing them, but I think sometimes I even fall into the trap of, oh, this is the hierarchy line, and so I can't go against this person, or I need to agree with that person, right? You fall into groupthink, or you fall into the same sorts of vanilla ideas. And so I think one of the things that this event allows us to do is every person comes in on the same playing field. There's no hierarchy involved, right? If you do come in and, let's say there's 5 people from an organization that are all part of a team that have come in, you get sat in separate groups. And so you're kind of, each of the experiences is curated in a way where, number one, you're not necessarily with working colleagues, so you don't know someone's level and that doesn't impact you. Number two, you're working on a problem that's, across the industry. So it's not like you have any more or less experience. And even if you worked in regulation for 20 years and the person sat next to you has not, it doesn't mean that you can't both tackle that problem. And you're forced to tackle that problem together for the next hour, right? So all brains are required. And it's that design thinking mindset, that methodology around, if we're genuinely going to be human centered, the only baseline, knowledge that you need is how to be a human. If you know how to be a human, you're allowed. And I think that's really important to bring to the table. And it really does elevate that experience face to face, because it's that, they say, what is it, 70% of communication is nonverbal. And so that, to Lucy's point, being face to face, being in person, you read the body language, you sense things, you can feel that, you can be on the same page. All around a cause or a problem or a challenge that's outside of your day-to-day job. It's not that it doesn't relate back to it and you can't take some lessons learned, but because you're all solving, it's kind of like when you have to build a Lego, together.
Yeah.
You're all tackling this new thing, and so you almost have to forget about everything else, all the hierarchy, all the organizational bureaucracy that you've got. And I think that provides almost this open space, as Lucy says, this safe space to say, we're all equals here. If you're a human, you're allowed to come, and we even had non-humans at Pharmageddon USA. We had a little pup that came by, and he was fantastic. So
Sweet.
all life is involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do think
Hello again. If the content of this video resonates with you, join the InnoPathways waitlist for early access to new content, offers, and our Founders Bundle for new programming. We'd love to have you join the community. The link's below in the notes.
Human-centered design, those are kind of ideas and principles that we borrow from in our impatient innovation kind of process. And then, as Lucy said, we then understand where our audience is in that innovation process. So if you're at step 1 of the innovation process, we're not going to jump you to step 4, but it's about, building onto that. How can we get you to step 2, to step 3? And I think one of the biggest differences, Lucy, that we found was that, the US is generally, and I'm making a generalization, more innovative, just because of the nature of their, economics, their society, the kind of companies that are headquartered there. And so it means that when we create these events, it's not that, the US is more innovative than Europe, but it's that they need different things to spark and to ignite that innovation process. And so we have to then use different levers to then get them potentially to different points, but just to ignite and to amplify and to spark that kind of that drive to want to do more. And I think that's, it's a hard job. It's hard to be able to say same event, same, name, different kind of locations, but different processes. And I think one time, Lucy, didn't someone ask us, oh, well, isn't it just going to be the same in the other one? We're going, no, it can't be, because if it was, not only would we, be repeating content, to Lucy's point, but we're not actually hitting the mission. That's not the objective. The objective is to spark that innovation for different people in different ways, recognizing the culture, the economics, the politics, the society, knowing that most pharma companies are headquartered in the US means that there's a different way of approaching those conversations. Regulation changes at a different pace. Lobbying has a different influence or impact. And it means then we talk about some of those things and, quite frankly, make it a bit uncomfortable. I think, one of the feedback that we got from Pharmageddon Europe was we all agreed too much. And that was a lesson learned for us. It was, gosh, we need to have more debates. We need to curate more debates for people to disagree respectfully, because that's the only way we're going to get further in that thinking and in that knowledge. And I think that, is our newest challenge that we're trying to work through, but a good one to have.
I find in the US the debates aren't hard. They're not hard to come by. People are very keen to debate and disagree, which is why I like the way Noreen gave a very concise and almost engineering point. And I was like, well, the vibes are different.
You need both. You need both, Luce.
Thank God you're here, Noreen. But people are really ready to have those debates, and it's why I'm getting really excited for Philly, because I know it's going to be a lively one.
I will start to wrap up here, but I think we could just keep talking because this is just a fascinating conversation. The goal is not to need this event, right? The success would be I'm out of a job.
Yeah, it's something I often say to my team, and even when I'm speaking to folks about what is your job, and I say my job is to not have a job because the nature of my job as a consultant, as the head of consulting, is to solve problems. And ironically enough, every problem that you solve then probably creates three more problems, right? And that's why the world of consulting exists in a little bit of a way. But I think, I always say my goal in life is to not have a job because once I've solved all of the world's problems, that's when I know I'm not needed anymore. I can go away, do something else, And I think similarly, I would argue that's a little bit of the goal of Pharmageddon. Like Lucy, you say it all the time. It's, our goal is to never have to do a Pharmageddon again because it's natural, it's integrated into the day-to-day workings of people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the event that was born to die, and success for us. I mean, I'm glad it exists because I'm all about community, and I'm glad of all the people that I've met along the way, and I want to keep building this community. But at the same time, we wish this event wasn't necessary, basically. So yeah, we're calling this one the event that was born to die.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation. I was so happy to be able to talk with both of you today. I've learned so much and I'm just re-energized in what this event is all about, what it's not about. So what's one thing, a piece of insight that you would give for folks, and what are you thinking forward?
Yeah, I think if there's one kind of one wish I had for people to take away from the conversation, it would just be talk to people outside of your industry if you're in pharma. I think there's a lot of power in connecting with other industries, learning from them, growing with them. And if you're not in pharma, talk to people in pharma because there's change that can be done. So I think it goes both ways. It's just connecting people across industries would be my kind of takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it's if anything's resonated with you that we've spoken about Pharmageddon, please join us, get in contact. 23rd, 24th of April, we'd love to have you involved in part of our community and the movement. It's going to be a great 2 days.
Fantastic. Can't wait. Thank you guys. It was so great talking to you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Zena.
so much. Thanks, everyone.